Right now, in your pocket or in your hand, there is a small block of metal doing something you never think about. And there is a real chance that block of metal exists because a child, somewhere on the other side of the planet, crawled into a hole in the ground today and has not come back up yet. No headline is currently running that story. No warning label is printed anywhere on the box. This file has been open for years. Almost nobody has read it. Case number 2. Open file. What exactly is inside your phone that makes this true? Who is actually digging it out of the ground? And how old are they? Where on earth is this happening? And why does one single country control almost all of it? When did this become the normal way to get it? And how, exactly, does something dug up by hand with no machinery end up inside a device sold in a glass display case on the other side of the world? Hi, I'm Marin Still. This is the file nobody opens. Let's open it anyway. Clue 1. The metal is called cobalt. It is one of the key ingredients inside the lithium-ion battery powering your phone, your laptop, and increasingly, electric vehicles. Without it, the battery either does not hold a charge properly or becomes dangerously unstable. There is currently no cheap, easy substitute at the scale the entire world's electronics industry needs, which means demand for cobalt has exploded over the last 2 decades and is still climbing. Here is the part that should stop you. Roughly 70% of the world's cobalt comes from a single country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Not 70% from a diversified handful of major mining operations. A huge share of it comes from something called artisanal mining, which sounds small and quaint. It is not. Clue 2. Artisanal mining means informal, unregulated digging, done largely by hand. No industrial excavation equipment. No engineered mine shafts with steel supports. Just people, sometimes entire families, digging tunnels directly into the earth with hand tools, chasing seams of cobalt ore sometimes dozens of meters underground. A researcher named Siddharth Kara at Harvard spent years actually traveling to these sites and documenting what he found. What he described was not a modern industrial operation. It was tens of thousands of people working with shovels, chisels, and their bare hands, digging narrow, unsupported tunnels into loose earth, chasing cobalt deposits with nothing holding the walls above their heads in place except luck. Here is where this stops being just a labor story and becomes something you cannot unhear. Kara documented children, some by his account as young as 6 years old, working these sites. Not occasionally, regularly enough to be a known, persistent feature of the supply chain. Small bodies fit into narrow tunnels that adult miners cannot. Some children dig directly underground. Others sort and wash ore at the surface, breathing in cobalt dust for hours at a time, a substance linked to serious respiratory illness with prolonged exposure. And then there are the tunnel collapses. Unsupported earth, dug by hand, chasing ore as deep as it goes, with no engineering, no structural reinforcement, no rescue equipment on site. When a tunnel collapses, and it does, repeatedly, documented across multiple sites over multiple years, the people inside are simply buried. Sometimes they are recovered, sometimes they are not. Clue 3, and this is where it comes back to you. Once that raw cobalt ore is dug out of the ground, it gets sold, often for very little money, to local buying stations. From there, it enters a supply chain that mixes it with cobalt from larger, more regulated industrial mines, refines it, processes it, and sells it onward to battery manufacturers who supply nearly every major electronics and electric vehicle company on the planet. By the time that cobalt is sitting inside a finished battery, on a shelf, in a store, it has been blended, refined, and resold enough times that tracing any single atom of it back to a specific mine, let alone a specific tunnel, is extraordinarily difficult, sometimes functionally impossible. Which means the device sitting in your hand right now was assembled from a supply chain that, somewhere upstream, very likely touched hand-dug tunnels where children were working, and where collapses have killed people whose names were never printed anywhere. Picture the actual scene. Early morning, a hillside pockmarked with hundreds of hand-dug openings, barely wider than a person's shoulders. Families working in shifts, some descending with nothing but a headlamp and a hand tool, others waiting at the surface to haul sacks of ore up on their backs. No safety inspector walks this site. No union represents these workers. The wage for an entire day's labor, digging and hauling ore by hand, has historically amounted to just a few dollars, sometimes less, a fraction of what that ore is eventually worth once it reaches a refinery. Major companies whose products end up containing this cobalt have publicly committed to auditing their supply chains, tracing sources, and eliminating child labor from them. Some progress has genuinely been made. But the supply chain itself, the sheer number of hands cobalt passes through between a hand-dug tunnel in the Congo and a sealed battery pack, remains murky enough that full verification, at the scale the global electronics industry actually operates, is still an unsolved problem. So why does almost nobody know this while holding the finished product? Partly because the distance is enormous, both geographically and structurally, between a tunnel in the Congo and a store shelf. Partly because by the time cobalt reaches a consumer, it has been so thoroughly mixed and processed that no single company can point to it and say, this specific atom came from this specific mine. The system is not designed to hide this deliberately. It is simply designed in a way that makes hiding it easy. Case 2 does not close on a clean answer, because there isn't one yet. Roughly 70% of a mineral the entire modern world depends on continues to pass, at least in part, through hand-dug tunnels where children are documented working, where the ground itself is the only thing standing between a person and being buried alive. So the next time you charge your phone, or watch it light up in your hand without a second thought, remember what you are actually holding. Not just glass and metal. A supply chain with a hole in the ground at the very beginning of it, and somewhere down that hole, a person who has never been thanked, and possibly never come back up. This file stays open. I'm Marin Still, and you were never meant to see this one.